Hi, welcome to QuBites, your bite-sized pieces of quantum computing. My name is Rene from Valorem Reply, and today we're going to talk about quantum computing for software developers. And for this, I'm honored to have my fellow Microsoft MVP and also special expert guest today, Johnny Hooyberghs. Hi, Johnny. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Rene. I'm perfectly fine, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as it relates to quantum computing, but also software development, computer science, all of that stuff?
Well, actually, I don't really have a background in quantum specifically. I am a software developer and software architect. I work as a consultant in Belgium. And I just have some free time, and most of that free time I'd like to spend on learning new things. Um, So basically, a couple of years ago, I think it's about 4 years ago, I saw a presentation on a Belgian conference on the topic of quantum computing by Microsoft, by somebody from Microsoft. Um, and I was interested. I thought, quantum computing? I know nothing about that. I know a little bit about quantum physics, but just like not PhD level stuff or university level stuff. So I was just intrigued, and I went to listen to this presentation, and it was very hard for me to follow. I found I found it too difficult. And that's when I decided to look into it myself. And then, yeah, like 4 years ago, it was still very difficult to look into that because all the material you find online, it's all very theoretical. It's all very hard
Yeah.
if you don't have a physics or mathematics background. So yeah, that's why I decided to make it out of a hobby to teach myself about quantum, and it's basically a hobby that got quite out of hand in my case.
Quite out of hand. Well, when it comes to quantum computing, I guess this is a good thing. But what conference was it actually in Belgium that you got interested?
It was Tekorama.
Shout out to my friends from Tekorama. Yeah, well, I've also been speaking there at Tekorama, and in fact, I also proposed to speak there in 2022. So hopefully, we'll be there, and maybe we meet
Yeah,
up in person.
me
So
too.
would be good. Yeah, let's cross both fingers. So, well, this is pretty amazing. So you already told us a little bit about your background and all of it. So you actually work in consulting and training in IT world, right? And you got
Yes.
super interested in quantum computing, and now you even became a Microsoft MVP. How did that happen?
Yeah. So basically, my life is just one thing happening after the other. I'm very happy with that. But I've been doing software development for since 2008. I had various jobs, and then since 2014, I'm actually working as a consultant. I really like to help companies with their problems, and this is. Specifically related to Microsoft technologies, to .NET and C Sharp, but also Azure Cloud and Azure DevOps. So that's basically the thing that I'm quite good at. So I'm helping customers with that. But next to that, I was also teaching. In Belgium, we have a system where when you already have work, you
Mhm.
can go to school in the evenings to maybe get a different degree if you like to switch your work or if you just want to know more about the thing you're working in. So I was actually teaching this night school, I think 2 or 3 nights a week in the beginning. And I did that until 2019 when some things happened in school. The school got merged into another school. And for me, it was becoming harder to
Yeah,
actually go to work during the day and then at night travel a little bit further to this new school, and the hours were not so well. So I stopped teaching after doing it for 10 years,
yeah,
which I very much liked. And then I got some new free time, and then I decided to teach other people. And that way I became a conference speaker. So first I spoke on these local events, then I spoke on international events, and that just it became such a wonderful thing to do, getting to know people like you. And then from one thing came another thing. People told me, "Why are you not an MVP? You're doing so much for the community." And then somebody nominated me, and then yeah, I became an MVP. And while this was happening, I was also looking into all of that quantum computing stuff, which is also very fun to talk about from a developer's perspective,
yeah.
because there's so many people talking about it from like a theoretical perspective, but now with the tools we have today from Microsoft and from other vendors, we can really dive into that from the developer's perspective.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just to making sure that everyone here's on the same page, let me explain what an MVP is. I mean, we might have talked about it in previous episodes, but for the sake that everyone knows about it. So Microsoft MVP basically stands for Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, which is a kind of a cheesy name, but basically it's an award that Microsoft gives to independent experts that share the knowledge, to put it in one sentence, basically, right? So Johnny does a lot of conference talks and projects, and well, he's written a book. We're going to talk about this, and a lot of other knowledge sharing for free in the end, right? Because we enjoy it. I do the same, right? Because we're passionate about these topics. We just love to talk about it and share the knowledge, and that gets honored basically with these awards. And that's really nice. So yeah, Johnny, Quantum MVP here, developer technologies, in fact, right?
Yeah.
And there's a subcategory for quantum and so on, but these are technical specific. But anyhow, let's. Oh, by the way, you mentioned .NET, right? At the time we're recording this, it's around the 20 years anniversary of .NET, right? So .NET is 20 years old, folks. Can you
Yeah, very
imagine?
cool. Very
I
cool.
still remember starting with .NET. Well, I'm old, right? So not
Me
with
too.
.NET 1, but
Yeah, me
.NET
too.
1.1. Actually, that's why I started. You started with 1.0.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually
Wow.
very lucky because I was actually doing programming since I was a teenager. So I was always trying to look for things to be creative, but I'm a lazy person, so I just want to sit behind a computer and do creative things behind a computer. And by that around 2000, I
Yeah.
was doing C++ development from Visual Studio 6. And I was doing my final test in school where you have to create like a project, and I was doing that in C++. And yeah, C++ was fun because I could create Windows applications, but
Yeah.
it was difficult. It was very difficult. And I was looking at other technologies that would make my life easier, but I wasn't a fan of Visual Basic. So I was actually looking into Delphi. Because they had
Oh,
like the visual editor, and you could create windows very easily and create visual applications. But I was missing Visual Studio, so I was just looking into Delphi for a couple of months, and then Microsoft released .NET. Um, and for me, the only trigger there was, okay, I can go back to Visual Studio. And that's why I made the switch to, okay, .NET. It looks a little bit like C++ if you look at the C# language, and I can use Visual Studio again. So I made that decision when I was just in my late teenager years, and I'm still very happy that I did that.
yeah. Absolutely. And also like Visual Studio 6, also very familiar with it. Like that's what I have been doing C++ all the time. And then, like you said, .NET came along and we could use the same tooling. And I think this is also one of the big benefits coming back to Quantum and Azure Quantum and all of it. The tooling is just so amazing, right? The
Yep.
whole stack of the Microsoft tooling with the QDK, the Quantum Development Kit, and so on is really amazing. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about your book, because you wrote a book called "Introducing Microsoft Quantum Computing for Developers," right? Which is exactly the topic. There we go. Look at this, folks. And yeah, so tell us a little bit what is in there and where can we get a copy? Like, is it available on, I guess, on all the big online retailers? And what is in there? What are you covering? And what is the kind of approach you're taking there?
Yeah, so when I started with quantum computing, or at least learning quantum computing, I'm not using it professionally. I thought it was a very difficult subject, and there's lots of stuff online.
Mhm.
There's lots of YouTube movies where, or it's going too deep, or it's too high level, or it's too pop sciencey stuff. So today it's a lot better, but 4 years ago when I started it was very hard to get good information on that. So that's why I started to do talks on quantum computing again from the developer's perspective. I really wanted to tell the story from how did I learn, what resources did I use, and then I think about 2 years ago, when I was on an American conference doing a talk on quantum computing, I got a call from Apris. Apris is the publisher
Mhm.
for this book,
Yeah.
and they called me and they said, "Yeah, we are really looking for an author that can do a Microsoft specific book on quantum computing." And I thought that's a very good idea. I really want to tell this story again from the developer's perspective,
Yeah.
learn how to use the tools, but also have a bit of theory about quantum computing, but not too much, just enough to really understand what's going on, and don't make the book too complex or too theoretical. So there's lots of examples in there. So yeah, that's the idea. The book is available from all major resellers, like Amazon, for example. So you can basically get it on Amazon in
Yeah.
almost every country. I know in America it's in a lot of bookshops. In Belgium specifically, we have a couple of local bookshops that also have copies of this book. So it's widely available. Yeah, and basically I divided it in a couple of parts. So there's 4 parts in total. Let me show you.
Yeah.
The first part is pure theoretical. It's like, what is quantum computing? Why would we do
Mhm.
quantum computing? I basically use some stories from my own to explain exponentially large problems and how to solve them, and how quantum computing can help us with that. Then I will talk a little bit about what is a qubit and what is a quantum state, stuff like that. In the final chapters of the book, I actually also do a very small recap of some mathematics skills that you need.
Yeah.
But again, it's basically high school level math that you need. Sometimes it looks frightening, but it is actually not so frightening. When I went to school, I was good at mathematics, but I didn't really understand why I would want to learn it. But today, when doing quantum computing, it actually makes more sense to me. Now it's, oh, okay, that's why I learned all of these things like trigonometry and linear algebra, stuff like that. So my book also explains like the basic stuff. This is like basic trigonometry stuff, that you can just recap for yourself. Okay, this was what it's all
Yeah.
about, because of course school is some time ago. And then the second part of this book immediately dives into the Microsoft Quantum Development Kit. So
Right.
how to install it, how to prepare your machine, how to create your first quantum program. The book contains lots of source code there. And then the next chapter, or the next part, has multiple chapters on already existing quantum algorithms. So we start by looking at, why is the algorithm there? What does it do? And how can we implement it in Q#, the quantum language from Microsoft, and how can we run that on our local machine? And then the final chapters, they talk a little bit about the preview from Azure Quantum, where you
Yeah.
can create your quantum applications, and instead of simulating them on your local machine or simulating them in the cloud, you can run them on actual quantum hardware, and how to do that. So it builds from the theory up until how to do it on your local machine, up until how you can run your stuff in Azure Quantum. And again, it's just written from my perspective, so not from this big PhD scientist's perspective.
Yeah, and I think this is especially the unique and very good part about it, is that you approach it like another software developer would probably approach it, right? And I love what you were saying about, like, I wanted to understand this topic really well, so I started to give talks about it and write a book about it, because the best way to learn a topic is actually to teach it, because you really need to understand it in depth if you want to explain it simply for a broader audience. And yeah, well, exciting, and pretty amazing. So everyone should get a copy of it. That is fantastic. So, beside your book, what other resources would you recommend for developers that want to get started with quantum computing on the Microsoft stack, like with Q# and the QDK?
Well, actually, what Microsoft is doing today with their documentation and their Microsoft Learn paths, I really like the fact that there's so much content out there for you to learn for Microsoft Quantum specifically. Other vendors are doing basically the same thing. I didn't really start Quantum with Microsoft. I actually started Quantum with IBM Q, which was also very rich in documentation. It was very visual, and today Microsoft is doing the same thing. The Q# language and the QDK is so close to .NET. So if you're already
Yeah.
used to working with tools like Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, or C# and .NET, it's going to be rather easy for you to get into this quantum space, because you're using the same tools. The language looks a little bit similar, so you
Yeah.
already know how to syntactically work with that.
Mhm.
Then there's lots of documentation describing the complete syntax for Q sharp and containing lots of examples for you to just play around with. And the fact that you can run your quantum algorithms on your local machine and you can even debug them, which doesn't really make sense because quantum shouldn't be debuggable, but because we are simulating our applications, we can really debug, we can put breakpoints, and we can look at the quantum state. And in reality, when you look at a quantum state, it collapses and you basically lose all of that information. But
Yeah.
while debugging in those
Yes.
tools, it's just like a mathematical representation of that state, and we can just look at it and learn from that. And I learned so much by doing just that, just putting just creating a circuit and putting qubits through some gates, and then looking at the quantum state, what is happening, to try and grasp what is really the power of these quantum computations.
Amazing.
And also Microsoft has these learn paths where you can step by step look at tutorials, do some exercises, and learn from the beginning up until the end. So you don't need to start with one of the most complex algorithms out there. No, you start from the beginning, from very simple hello world kind of applications by putting a qubit in superposition, and then just continue the path and go more complex step by step.
Very good. Johnny, we could talk for many, many more hours, but we're already at the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and your interesting journey. That very much appreciated.
Thank you. I'm very happy to talk about this. As you said, I can go on for hours about these topics, but yeah.
Let's continue that another time. And thanks everyone for joining us for yet another episode of QuBites, your bite-sized pieces of quantum computing. Watch our blog and follow our social media channels to hear all about the next episodes. And of course, you can visit our website to watch all the episodes from previous seasons. So season 1 to 5 now. Take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.